following the brutal killing of two innocent encampment residents. The site of the murders, the Flat Rock encampment near Victoria Street, is closed due to the environmental and public safety concerns. However, the housing and homelessness crisis has only worsened since. Simcoe Community Media is currently visiting various encampments and speaking with Barrie residents from all walks of life, including encampment residents, community leaders, politicians, activists, and healthcare experts. Our goal is to better understand what led to this crisis, whether this could have been prevented, what steps are needed to provide adequate housing and support, and whether similar tragedies could occur again if current policies remain unchanged. As part of this effort, our volunteer civic journalist Christine Nayler sat down with former Barrie Ward 2 councillor and current social worker Keenan Aylwin. The following is their interview.
Hi, this is Christine from Simcoe Community Media, and I am today sitting and talking with a former city councillor and member of the Barrie Housing and Homelessness Justice Network, Keenan Aylwin, and we're talking about the recent displacement of encampment residents. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thanks for having me.
So you're aware that the encampment, known as Flat Rock, has now been declared an environmental disaster by the Ministry of the Environment, and up to 100 residents who were living there have now been permanently displaced from their homes and their community of support. Do you think the city and county are doing enough to support these residents?
Well, clearly not. I mean, you don't end up with a situation where up to 100 people are living rough outdoors without proper shelter, sanitation, resources, support, if your government is doing enough to support people. They've created this humanitarian disaster through their policy by not actually funding housing for people. That is the only solution to the housing crisis, is social and supportive housing to get people off the streets and into a safe place to call home. And they have not done that. So they've not done enough to support the people in our community who are unhoused, and this is the result.
Okay. According to the mayor and CEO Prowse, only 6 residents have accepted the county's offer of shelter. What does that say to you about what is being offered to these residents?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it speaks to the inadequacy of emergency shelter as a response to the housing and homelessness crisis. Emergency shelter is meant to be a temporary solution to house people in emergency situations for a short period of time until they're able to get a safe, secure, permanent place to call home that's affordable and that meets their needs, their specific needs. The shelter system we have now is overcrowded. People don't have privacy. They often, it's not dignified living conditions in shelters. I know shelter workers and organizations are doing their best to meet the crisis, but we are treating shelter as the only solution to the housing crisis when we actually need to be housing people in social and supportive housing, which would give people a dignified place to call home. So I think it really points to the inadequacy of emergency shelter as that solution to the housing crisis. It's not a solution. It should be just a temporary emergency response, and it's become the only thing that the county and the city are doing to try to get people out of encampments and off the streets into shelter. So it's clearly not working, and they need to reconsider their approach.
Okay. So Barrie CEO Michael Prowse has said that the cleanup will take months and cost millions of dollars. Do you think these cleanup costs could have been avoided if the city took a more proactive approach to the encampments?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think what the city has done, like if we take a step back to this term of council, the approach that this council and this mayor have taken to encampments has been to emphasize enforcement, sending in police and bylaw to displace people from encampments or threaten them with eviction and then eventually evict people from encampments. That has been the primary focus of this term of council and this mayor. And all that does is push people from one part of the city to the other, or into the darker corners of the city, further away from more visible locations in the city. And I think we've seen the results of that enforcement approach with this encampment at Flat Rock, that people were pushed into the dark corners of the city where there were fewer complaints, but people were left to their own devices and not supported in the way that they deserved to be supported. And if the city and the county had taken, as you say, a more proactive approach, they could have provided sanitation services to people. They could have built rapid housing for people and housed people instead of just pushing people around the city away from their support systems, away from their community, and wasting valuable public resources in the process as well. We know that the police budget in Barrie has increased by more than 22% since this mayor and council were elected. So that's in just 3 years. It's increased by more than 22%. That's tens of millions of dollars that could have gone to supporting people and housing people, and instead we've seen this disastrous result where we then have to spend millions more cleaning up an encampment rather than spending that money on housing.
So Mayor Alex Nuttall said that he and his council inherited this problem, that even though they were aware of the conditions that people were living in at this encampment, their hands were tied due to the charter rights of these residents. Do you think this is true, or were there steps the city and county could have taken in order to mitigate the environmental risk and hazards for encampment residents?
Mm-hmm. So when the mayor says his hands were tied when it comes to encampments, he's talking about evicting people forcefully from encampments. And he's correct. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms says that people have a right to life, liberty, and security of the person. And the courts have ruled that evicting people from encampments is a violation of that charter right. So they can't take that approach with encampments. But where their hands aren't tied is with actually housing people or providing people accessible and appropriate shelter space. And clearly they have not done so, and that's the alternative they could have done to prevent that situation. But they instead chose to fund police and bylaw officers removing people, and it clearly hasn't worked.
As a member of the Barrie Housing and Homelessness Justice Network, are you aware of any attempts by advocates to get the city or county to address the environmental concerns at encampments within our city?
So I remember years ago when I was a member of the Simcoe County Alliance on Homelessness Barrie chapter, we had requested that the city provide garbage pickup at an encampment site. We were told that it was not possible, that they wouldn't do so. And then I know more recently the Barrie Housing and Homelessness Justice Network has issued a list of demands, including increasing public washroom access so that everyone in the city, including people living in encampments, can access those public washrooms at all hours of the day, which would help with the sanitation issues we see at sites like this. So yeah, I think advocates have been asking for support like this at encampments for a long time. And the narrative has always been that if you provide sanitation services, garbage pickup, washrooms to people in encampments, that it's enabling, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's just simply providing sanitation services and garbage pickup to make sure that things are clean. And if you truly don't want to enable encampments, then you should build housing. That's how you get rid of encampments, is by building appropriate housing for people. So if you truly wanted to get rid of encampments, that's what you would do. And we've not seen the effort that's required to do that from any level of government.
Are you aware of other municipalities who have taken a more proactive approach to addressing environmental concerns and encampments within their municipalities, and what were those?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head any other municipalities that have done that. I know it's a problem across Canada with the housing crisis. I think Barrie, from what I've seen, has taken a more forceful approach with enforcing evictions from encampments than many other municipalities. And they've spent a lot of valuable public resources doing so. And that's why we've seen the problem get worse. We see more people visibly experiencing homelessness in our city. We see our shelter system full pretty much every night. So we haven't seen those actual real solutions implemented here. But there are other places in the world where they have actually provided housing for people. Usually it's social and supportive housing, nonprofit housing. That's the way that we get people off the street, is by providing that appropriate, affordable housing for people, and we haven't done.
And so compared to the cost of the enforcement response that Barrie's taking to addressing the homeless crisis and encampments, compared to like what you're talking about, some of these supportive housing, investing in that, what would be like the most cost-effective use of our tax dollars and proven like more successful?
Yeah. So having people living in homelessness is actually way more expensive than providing people with social housing. We know that the cost of a shelter bed, the cost of a hospital bed, the cost of a jail bed is way more expensive than providing social housing for people. And we know that people experiencing homelessness often end up in a hospital bed or a shelter bed or in prison because they're doing what they have to do to survive on the street. So it would be more cost effective to actually provide housing for people. It would take an upfront investment from government to build the units, but it would save tax dollars in the long run. So it's not only the humane and the right thing to do, but it's the most cost-effective thing to do as well.
So talking about, like you're talking about like hospital beds and stuff, a lot of people are not thinking that way, but you work in the community and you support people that are living unsheltered in our community. We were talking to some residents earlier today at an encampment, and they were talking about the way that they care for each other in regards to some of the health issues that happen because of people living outside and that, and one of them was like wound care and people like having like not proper access to showers and being able to clean themselves and clean clothes, and they get damp and wet and stuff like that, which impacts people, and so they end up with a lot of health, and we're not thinking in advance of like what the health care costs are when we already have an overburdened healthcare system.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, I don't think people really put themselves in the shoes of someone who's experiencing homelessness. Like, can you imagine you're down on your luck and you've ended up unhoused for some reason or another? You're just trying to get back up on your feet, trying to find a place to live, trying to access a shelter bed when the shelter's full. So then you go and you find what community you can find in an encampment, and you're doing your best to just survive on the street, and then something happens. You get injured, you get sick. I'm a baby when I get sick, and I don't want to move, I don't want to leave my apartment, but I can't imagine being out living rough and dealing with an illness or an injury. And then on top of that, you then have police or bylaw coming in and saying, oh, you've got to move from this spot, and we're gonna force you to move, so you can't bring your stuff with you, you're gonna lose your possessions, we're gonna traumatize you in the process. Like the trauma and just the hardship that people go through on a day-to-day basis is hard to fathom, and I don't think a lot of people realize what people's reality every day on the street is. It's not humane, it's not compassionate, and we need to do better as a society.
So it's like the human cost as well as the financial cost, right, to the situation, because when people are being like living in those situations and experiencing that trauma and stuff like that, and some of them are in that situation because of trauma they've had before, it just adds to it, right? And it adds to those financial costs that we don't look at when we're looking at homelessness. And it's like, what is it going to cost to build this supportive housing, right? But what is it costing us not to, right? Like,
exactly.
So, yeah.
And I think we need to ask ourselves as a society too, like, if it is not only the right thing and the humane thing to house people and the most cost-effective solution to the housing crisis, why is it that politicians aren't implementing those solutions and housing people? And I believe it's because politicians like to have someone to blame. for the problems in society. And so if you can point to people experiencing homelessness, if you can point to people who use drugs, people living in poverty, immigrants, you can point to them and you say, oh, they're the ones causing the problem in society, then it takes the blame off of the people in positions of power, off of the politicians. So it's a distraction from the people in positions of power and the billionaires who control our economy and control our politics. It distracts from them and puts the blame on the most vulnerable people in our communities. It's a clever political game, and it works in a lot of ways, but we fight back when we build compassionate relationships with the people in our community around us.
Mm-hmm. It works, but it doesn't, right? And like the continued stigmatization and criminalization of people does have costs that are not even being measured, right? And we have to challenge those costs, right? And You've been an advocate for defunding the police. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that the increased spending in order to manage homeless population is good use of our tax dollars? You've pretty much talked about this, but the more proactive ways that this money could be invested, mm-hmm. short-term and long-term. So long-term would be, the housing, but what are some other ways that they could be supporting encampment residents in the short term rather than just going there and writing them up tickets and telling them they have to leave?
Well, I think when it comes to the police budget, politicians use investment in the police budget as a signal to the public that they are doing something about public safety. It's people equate investment in the police with public safety, but there's actually studies that show that investment in police and the number of police in the community don't actually correlate with the amount of safety or the amount of crime in a community. There are other things, other investments that create safety in our community. Investing in housing is one of them. Investing in healthcare is another. Investing in education is a big one. And it's a lot more cost effective when we invest in those services rather than policing. Police show up after a crime is committed. And if you ask a lot of people who have been the victim of a crime or experienced some sort of crime, they're a hell of a lot effective at investigating those crimes and doing anything about them in a lot of cases. So we need to actually look at what causes crime, and it's often desperation, a feeling of isolation and neglect in society, and so we need to support people to be able to reduce crime. So we should be making those investments in the upstream solutions rather than on enforcement. And enforcement in a lot of ways actually perpetuates crime through perpetuating trauma. We know that traumatized people, people who have been hurt themselves, are often the perpetrators of crime and violence. So when you further criminalize someone who has committed a crime, you're just further traumatizing them and actually making them more likely to commit a crime. We know that people who are incarcerated are more likely to reoffend after they come out of prison. So it doesn't actually stop crime. It just houses people in a prison, costs the taxpayer a lot of money, traumatizes people, and creates more crime in the long run. So we need to be rethinking public safety and how we create it in our community, because policing does not create that public safety that we're looking for.
Some advocates fear that the murders which took place at this encampment will lead to further stigmatization and will be used to justify the continued and increased criminalization of those who are unsheltered. Do you share this concern?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very concerned about that. And I think we've seen comments from the mayor already where he is using this tragedy and this violence to call for zero encampments without talking about actually housing people, which is how you would achieve zero encampment. So it worries me, and I want to know what he means by that. And I'm afraid that he means increasing enforcement and just arresting people, removing people, and pushing them further to the margins of our society, which I think can lead to disastrous results like these murders. When we push people to the margins of our society and dehumanize people, and isolate people and push them away from their community and vital services, I think tragedies like this can be the result. So I really worry about that and how that will further stigmatize people and push people to even more desperate and dark situations.
So 2 members of this community were brutally murdered. It has been a traumatizing experience for not just the residents of that encampment, but for the unsheltered community who knew and were friends and cared about these people, or who themselves are living outside and now are living with a fear, right, for their own safety. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that the city and county should be making grief and trauma support available to the residents who were impacted by this tragedy?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, the city and the county have made any sort of attempt they will make in the future to support people a lot harder by immediately removing people from the site, evicting people from the site without supporting people in a proper way. People have been displaced and have lost their belongings. They're afraid. They don't know what's going on. They don't know where to go. They're being pushed around different parts of the city with nowhere to stay. And even if the city and the county were to provide those supports, which they should, it would be hard to connect with people because of the displacement that they've already enacted against people.
For sure. Like we've experienced this in trying to do this story, is that people have been displaced. Like that was their community of support, their family of choice, right? The people that were living there, and they were displaced from it, and people have scattered because 60 to 100 people cannot just go to one place. They're all over the place. And so finding these people to connect with the people that have been impacted has been a challenge for outreach workers, for people that are wanting to offer support to them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's why the enforcement approach to encampments is just not the right approach. There's demonstrable evidence that when you evict people from encampments or move people around the city, they are less likely to access much needed supports. It creates a barrier to accessing life-saving supports, and it's counterproductive to the stated goals of the city and the county.
What steps do you need to be taken to address the growing housing and homelessness crisis in our community? I know you've already talked a little bit about this, but what do you want to see from the city and county?
Yeah, I think housing. I don't know how many times we need to say it, but social and supportive housing are the one and only solution to the housing and homelessness
that's
crisis.
key. Can you maybe go more into depth on that type of housing? Because of what I've seen, a lot of times we'll get people a room, right? And it's just check a box, like, oh, they're housed now. Yeah. And then they come back into being unsheltered again, 3 months, 6 months, a year later, because that's not what they need. They weren't set up for success. So can you talk about what you mean when you say supportive housing? Yeah.
So supportive housing is a model where it's permanent housing for people. So it's not a shelter bed, and it's not transitional housing. It's not a temporary housing unit for people. It's a permanent housing unit for people. But there are extra supports on site. Social workers, mental health workers, even you can have primary care, healthcare providers on site. So it's those wraparound supports for people to make sure, as you say, to set people up for success in housing. Being homeless and being chronically homeless for a long period of time is incredibly traumatizing and difficult, surviving day in, day out on the streets. I don't think I could do it. I don't think a lot of people have what it takes to survive something so grueling. So when you do eventually provide permanent housing to people, some people might need some extra support to make it work. So that's what social or supportive housing is. And I think we need to expand our public housing portfolio in Canada 100 times. We need the federal and provincial governments to partner with municipalities to create hundreds of thousands of public housing units across the country. The government used to build public housing. We don't anymore in this country, and we rely on private developers to build housing, and it's not affordable. So units get built, they're not affordable. many times units sit empty and they're bought up by investors. We know that investors are buying up houses and apartment buildings and condos across the country, raising the rents, raising the cost of housing across the board. So we need to actually focus in on public housing as a public good. Housing should not be a commodity or a way to make a profit. Housing is a basic human right and a basic human need. We all need it to survive. So the government, like healthcare, needs to provide housing for people. We acknowledge that healthcare is a necessity of life and that everyone deserves healthcare as a human right in Canada. Although it's imperfect and we need to improve access on that front too, but we should be acknowledging the same with housing, that it's that basic human right and should be provided universally to people in this country.
And they have said that they've acknowledged that it's a human right, but they're not taking the steps to, and we talk a little bit about the myth of affordable housing, right? Like when you talked a bit about it, right? Like what is being, said is affordable housing. Who is it affordable for, right? It's definitely not affordable for people that are on social assistance. OW rates have not gone up, and ODSP, and people that are on pensions, or even people like working minimum wage jobs and low income jobs cannot afford a place to live. So what accountability do you think that there needs to be for all levels of government to be providing social housing? I grew up in social housing, right? My mom was a single mom, and we would not have had the beautiful childhood memories we had if we did not have that provided for us, right? And our country is failing. All levels of government are failing because they've stopped. They've handed it over to the developers and say, you take care of this.
Yeah, we are. We're all failing our communities, and we see the result, like these murders, the displacement of people. I think all point to a failure of all levels of government to actually provide housing and support for people in our communities. And we shouldn't have gotten to this point. It's preventable. And other governments in the world have done it, have built public housing and don't have the issues of homelessness that we have here. So we can fix it. We can do something about it, but we just need the political will.
And how does the political will come? I feel it comes from us, right? Educating the public, and the public, they want to be voted back in, right? So I think sometimes people think I'm just one person, I don't have any power. But can you talk, as being a former politician and an advocate, about the power people hold?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I knew a simple answer about how we build that power. I think it takes a lot of work. I think it takes, on a basic level, connecting to people in our community, getting to know our neighbors, getting to know the people around us, and then getting involved in community organizations, in a union at work, talking to your coworkers about these issues, talking to your neighbors about these issues, and building collective power as a group, because I think one person alone can't succeed and do these things. You need a collective and a movement of people to push government to do the right thing and to support people in our communities. And that takes a lot of hard work to build that. And there's no better time to start than now, but it's going to take a long time before we're at the point where we have those movements that can actually force the people in power to do what we need them to do to support our communities.
And thank you. Do you have any last words or last thoughts?
Before the last word, if Keenan doesn't mind, just about the supervised consumption side, I don't know if all this, because we were talking to people, they were talking about the mental health issues a lot. So you were one of the advocates for supervised consumption side. Yeah. When you were the councillor, you followed up and then had it approved. And then what do you feel about the process that was followed? What were you hoping to achieve? And how do you feel now, the site has been, closed?
I mean, I think we've seen an immense amount of death and suffering in our community as a result of a lack of services for people who use drugs in our community. And people who use drugs are treated as disposable in our community. And I think the lack of a supervised consumption site is one piece of evidence that that's how our governments feel about people who use drugs. And we know those sites save lives. We know they reduce bloodborne infections. We know they reduce instances of discarded needles and public drug use. We know they work. And yet the funding wasn't approved for the site. So I think it again points to the way that people in positions of power and politicians treat certain people in our communities as disposable, and that their lives don't matter, but they do. And the people we've lost were loved and are still loved, and the harm that our community has suffered as a result of their losses will ripple for generations, frankly.
Yeah, when I hear you say that, and I know it's not coming from you, but I know that it is true on all levels of government and also society, that there are certain people that are treated as disposable, and it makes me want to cry every time. And I have to fight back the tears because my son was one of those people, and he was treated as disposable, and he wasn't disposable, and he's gone because of system failures, even though he was a strong local advocate for himself and for others, and he had a whole family advocating for him. But his life, because he used drugs, and we all use drugs, and some drugs are socially acceptable, and if you use them, you're going to get support and you're going to get whatever. But depending on what drug you use, you're considered, like less than human, and like your life doesn't matter. And it scares me and it breaks my heart that we've been doing this work for 5 years, and just seeing how we've gone backwards. Like the few small steps that we gained and fought so hard for have been just pulled out from under us, and just the attitude on all levels of government and by people in power of towards people who use drugs, and about how stigmatizing it is and how they don't matter. It's heartbreaking and it's scary, and I just want to say to all the families and all the people who have lost a loved one that their lives did matter and they weren't disposable, and we'll continue to fight for them. And I'm just doing a plug now. I'm wearing my other hat as Ryan's hope and as Ryan's mom. That International Overdose Awareness Day is coming up on August 31st. And we are doing a candlelight vigil of hope and remembrance, and we invite everybody to come out and to remember those in our community and across the country we have lost, because it's far too many. And like you were talking about, the ripple effects, like Ryan's death ripples through our family, and it doesn't, when we count there's been over 55,000 people who've lost their lives due to the inaction of our government to address the toxic drug crisis. But the actual cost of lives impacted is so much more, because each one of those people was a member of a family and was loved by a community, and their loss has rippled through in ways that we can't measure in those families and communities. So your final words.
I was struck when you were talking about the little progress we felt we had made and sort of the backsliding since then. And I think we need to really name what's happening, and it's the rise of fascism across the world. Like, we're seeing it in the US with Donald Trump. We're seeing it here with the rise of the far right, and the way that people in positions of power and politicians have folded to that right-wing and fascist pressure, where we are investing in a police state as the only solution to any problem in our society, where we're scapegoating people experiencing homelessness, people who use drugs, and immigrants for society's problems. That's what's happening. It's the rise of fascism, and we need to fight back. And to fight back, we need to build relationships in our community, and that's hard work. And we need to get out and meet people and get organized against the far right, because they're getting organized and they're trying to claim power, and we need to stop it, or else we're going to keep losing people.
Well, thank you so much for your time and talking to us today, and also for your commitment to the community and to actually be one of those people that is actually working to try to stop fascism and to try to actually make a difference and save people. And you're out there every day, like, reminding people that they do matter and they are loved and cared for. And I thank you for that.
Thanks, Christine.
Yeah.